Hello there, welcome back to Ears to the East, where we're going to have a little bit of a talk about the latest album, Luminous by Scandal. Scandal being obviously the legendary Japanese all-girls rock band, the
Mm.
Guinness award-winning, longest-running in the world female band to never change their membership or have a hiatus. They are the band who have been really, I mean, we know baby metal obviously broke out Japanese music a lot to the rest of the world, a good sort of 10 or more years ago. But Scandal were the ones who set into motion the girls' rock band revolution. There were other bands and ones before them, but they were the ones who made it a solid mainstream thing. But it's a fairly well documented fact that their fame, as much longevity as they've had,
Mm.
has it's had its I say it had its up, and like with a lot of bands, it's slowly tapered down over time. So we're here to talk a little bit about the new album Luminous, and a little bit to also talk about the longevity of bands like this and how they deal
Mm.
over time with what appears to be slowly decreasing sales. Now, I'll say first of all that there's so many factors involved in this. Obviously, when we talk about the sales decreasing, it's like the decrease of physical sales, where there's less physical albums being sold anyway as time goes on. Um, Obviously, bands, you expect them to lose a little bit of the pop sheen and become more and more just reliant on their core fan base, the people who stick with them, and the smaller numbers of people who they slowly accrue over time. But any particular thoughts on the new album? How do you think that sort of ties in? Do you think there's
Um,
the album itself is not connecting with people or anything like
well,
that?
I don't want to go too much in depth on this, and I know that you're in the middle of doing a album review at the minute. I'm currently doing an album review at the minute, so we're both in the middle of an album review, which will be posted to each our channel. So if you want like more in depth, go and make sure to sub to both our channels and
Well,
check out each
that's
of
where
those reviews.
we're still going to talk in this video, but that's where we talk about our opinions on the album a bit more.
Yeah, that's where we'll go a little bit more in depth, um, knife and fork, tearing it apart a bit. But I thought the album. I have a few complaints with this album. A few.
Okay.
For me, the biggest thing in this album is actually though the coherent experience of it for me. There's a couple of things that irritate me. And that is just like so that is just song placement of the way that this album is structured.
Really?
For example, the first song comes in and it's quite chill song, quite slow paced. And then you've got the second song. I've forgotten the song names already. I do apologize. The second song comes in, which is like your full on Scandal goodness. It's fast paced. It's kind of, but I'm sat there and I'm wondering, well, why isn't that the first song? And then the third song comes in, and that momentum that the second song builds just peters out again. And then you've got I think it's Plum, and I can't remember the other song. I do apologize. That come in, which is your more traditional, like Scandal-esque pop songs. So you've got those
Yeah.
kind of coming in back to back, and then from about track 6 to about track 10, which was straight out of line, I think, or something like that. For the song was going again. I'm awful at song names. Never remember them.
We both are. I've just loaded up the list just so I can remember it
Yeah,
myself.
I'm gonna have to do the same now. But from track 6 to 10 is your Scandal, like rock band, the rock band Scandal. Like all those songs kind of come
Yeah.
in. And then you've got the last 2, 3 songs of the album again, which kind of come in and it drops the pace, picks it back up again. And then the last song is just like, yeah, we're gonna drop it, but we're gonna end it in a little bit of a hype, but we're gonna drop it.
I,
And and
yeah.
for me, it's just an album that's everywhere. And my biggest complaint is it if you listen to these songs individually, brilliant, fine, awesome, love it. But in an album, it just does not flow. And to counter my argument as well, if you look at the
Oh,
Spotify
don't
numbers,
worry, I will.
if you look at the Spotify numbers as well, I know Spotify's not the be all and end all. A lot of people are going to listen to this physically and on YouTube and stuff like that. But the Spotify numbers are the same. You've got a massive dip at the beginning of the album.
But
Then a lot of people
that's the
listening to
same
the.
for every album that comes out, though. I mean,
I suppose, but it is quite shocking.
I, I'm gonna throw in a bit of opposition to this because I've got to be honest. My favorite thing about this album was how it flowed. Um,
Seriously? Oh, I hated
yeah,
it. I
It's
hated it.
so I think the introduction song for me is a very sort of it's a nice shot straight down the middle. It's a bit experimental, it's a bit playful, but it reintroduces the band as a band after Mirror was a little bit more obviously COVID era, everything was a little bit more spaced out. The songs were written a lot in isolation and things like that. And obviously there was tragedies and things that came up. So that song was a bit more scatological and a lot of people wanted them to sound a bit more together on this album. And I think for me, Pleats really went in that direction, sort of putting them together. And then I think it's a fairly standard fair thing. You put in the first song as an interesting earworm, and then usually the single is track two. So for me, putting Fanfare second was a fairly wise note. Now, I do know that you say track three with Tashi Tachi, it does lower the tempo, but for me, it lowers the tempo, which is an interesting variation. But what it does is it exchanges the tempo for a much more thick, layered arrangement. So what you lose in speed, you get back in terms of having more for your ears to enjoy. Because Fanfare is, if I was being critical, a little bit thin. It's pacey, but it's a little bit thin, whereas Watashi Tachi replaces that. Now, Plum, another good song, a little bit of a little bit fairly standard. I've got to be honest. So I'm trying to remember. I always get a little bit confused about Candy and Vision because I get those two confused with them. And I've got to be careful because one of them, I can't remember if it's Candy or Vision, but one of them is kind of like my low light of the album. It's the song that I think is the most like kind of replaceable, and like the other one is one of my highlights of the album. So I just can't
Um,
remember which one's which.
Candy is the more like pop. Candy's a bit more like Plum. Candy's a bit more on the pop spectrum. Vision, I'm trying to remember which one Vision is. Is that the one
I
that's
think
like pretty like punk-esque? Is
I
that the
think
one I'm
Vision
thinking
is the
of?
one. I think Vision is the one that I didn't get on with. I might be wrong though, so I'm gonna be a little bit careful. I say that.
Mm.
But anyway, the thing is, the flow remains. Then obviously you're now halfway through the album. Loop comes in. It adds a bit of a rocky, gnarly feel to it. It's a very straight shooting song. There's no real complexity to it, but it's a nice little shot in the arm of an album that's now halfway through. Line of Sight keeps the rock energy going, but now with a slightly more, a little bit more nuance. There's variations. There's like switches to it. And then Anatahe is, yeah, it has some issues, but it basically sort of again keeps that energy. But now you can feel us winding down towards the end. 147, nice little wind down towards the end. And then the last track for me, I think still remains my favorite track on the album. I thought it was a great single. Highlights just like a beautiful single, really well written, fantastic way to finish the album in a sort of a mid-tempo way, kind of coming full back to where we started. For me, the biggest problem with the album is, with exception to that last track, which is absolutely brilliant, but is not your typical single. For me, the biggest problem is that there's no song that really stands out as that's the single. And I know you shouldn't write an album that way. I mean, Fanfare is the most typical Scandal song, which is why I think it was the song that came out as a single on the release day. Well, the music video came out on the same day as the release day of the album because it's the most Scandal song. So if you're already a Scandal fan, it's going to win you over. And the ones that came out before that were kind of like, Line of Sight was to show they're back to being a rock band.
For me,
Highlight because it's a
that
great
is the
song.
song of this album.
What, Line of Sight?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have a chorus to write home about. And I hate to say it, I know it's such a like a simple objection, but that's albums a lot of the time, an album's sale can be multiplied just by having a strong single. And I just
Mm.
don't feel this album has a strong single. It's same ironically as Mirror was more about the album than the singles, although
Mm.
that at least had One More Time, which
Yeah.
was
It's
pretty
it's
solid.
it's ironic because I'm just looking at Spotify now, what you said about the ending being brilliant. Now, I wasn't particularly too keen on the ending, but the ending song, it's in kanji. I apologize. I can't say
Yeah,
it.
I just call it highlight because the rest is such a mouthful.
Yeah, it's actually got 427,000 listens as of the time of we're recording this, which is the second most listened song on the album, with the first actually being Line of Sight, which has been listened over 1 million times.
But I can't help but feel that that is partly biased by the fact that they are, the songs that came out first. I know that the views are not, that the listens are not balanced because it does actually like, it does treat the album tracks as separate. But I can't help but feel that a lot of people will be coming back to those singles because they are the singles. But I don't think that those viewing figures, listening figures, even 1 million, I just don't think that's on par with the kind of like the singles that Scandal were having, you go back like a couple of albums, you go back to like Kiss from the Darkness, I think they were having singles that were much more, you know, they were like connecting
Well,
with that.
a million people disagree with you.
Yeah, but yeah, in the grand scheme of things, a million is not like
Yeah.
actually for Spotify figures, that's not that much. I mean, I'd love to know how
Well,
that
well,
compares to
that's
like
something else I'm going
Masterpiece
to
or
get into,
Shohei
right?
Kimi.
That's something else I'm going to get into here with the latest
Yeah,
album. Obviously, whether or not you look on Spotify or in the Japanese album charts as well, listening figures for Scandal are down across the board. Obviously, Luminous is fairly new, so we can't just say, oh, it's going way down compared to everything else, because it needs a couple of months, obviously, to get its numbers up, probably. So I doubt it will be as low as probably what
I
they are
agree.
right now. But an interesting factor for me is Scandal. With every album Scandal's ever released, they've always managed to be at least a minimum top 5 in the Japanese charts.
Yeah,
Luminos is the first time they're not even in the top 5, not even in the top 10.
top
It came in
10.
at 11th, which is a
Yeah.
massive drop off for what Scandal is. And considering that you were saying as well that Mirror was rushed, that was roughly about coming off the end of
I don't
COVID
think it
and
was
stuff like
rushed. I
that.
think it was just like more of a, it was a much more complicated
Mm.
birth to that album, um, rather
So
than rushed. Yeah.
so this Luminos would have been like, this is the first album where they've had the time to kind of really think about it, really gel, like really think about how they're going to move forward. And the reception to it, I'm not going to say the reception is bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it doesn't hit the heights, nowhere near
Well,
that
I
what
think
we associate with Scandal.
this is where we perhaps transfer more
I
into
feel like I feel
a
like the
slightly
bad guy in
larger
it.
conversation.
I feel like the
No, no,
bad guy
no.
in this episode. I'm like the Howard of this episode. I'm like, yeah, but here's the statistics, bitch.
Well, the interesting thing is though, is that like, I mean, so the irony is that I don't think either of us are actually like saying that the album has failed in any way, but it's more of an interesting commentary on because we did a video a few months ago where we talked about the longevity of bands, and one of the things that we said is that and obviously it's so obviously true, but we were talking about how when your time in the limelight is going to slightly falter over time just by the sheer nature of things, by evolving trends and such. Like what you fall back on is how good you are to slowly amassing fans over time and how loyal your core fan base is. And that's when your real genuine quality and humility will wear out, will become wearable, if you like. And that's where bands like Scandal will always have a future. But it's interesting seeing how that's affected them. And like you say, this is the so charts usually I wouldn't consider as the most important thing because obviously it depends on what else came out at the time. But it is an interesting metric. And like you say, every single album to this point has hit in the top 5. And this one's the first one, didn't hit number 11, didn't quite break into the top 10. So,
Which is still
and
not
you look,
bad by any stretch of the imagination, by the way. To even get like a top 11 is still fucking amazing.
but it is interesting because it says something about, I mean, obviously, this is you had Mirror came out during the COVID era, so you could argue it had less competition. So I mean, if we more draw this by comparison to Kiss from the Darkness, which came out 4 years ago, um, and you know that I think is more of a comparable album. There's a lot sonically similar about the two albums and everything.
Mm.
I think that Luminous to me, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this. Luminous to me is the better overall album, but Kiss from the Darkness has the better individual songs. And that's the thing is when you get to that point, I think there's not so many people now who sit down and listen to an album. Like album listening is not a thing anymore. You just need that one song that connects with people. You know, you get it on a theme tune, or you know, someone who puts it on like it gets like on TikTok videos or whatever.
I'm gonna have to disagree with that one. As somebody who
Okay.
avidly still listens to full albums.
Well, no, you and I do, but the point is I'm saying that we are the rarity. We are the rarity. We know that
Are
we're
we the
not one
rarity?
stripe.
Let us know in the
Yeah, we are.
comments. Do you guys still listen to full-fledged albums? That'd be interesting to hear. Or is Howard right? Do you only listen to one or two songs off an album?
I have done surveys with my audience at least, and I was shocked. Even people who are like older than me, who I were like, oh, this person's definitely going to be into the traditional, well-honored ways of us musos. They're like, nah, No, I only listen to the singles on YouTube. I'm like, fuck is going on here? Yeah, it's like getting my wax disc recorder out, just brushing it off and everything. But yeah, I was surprised how many people don't listen to full albums anymore. And so
Do you know
yeah,
what? Do you know what the most
come.
disappointing thing for me is? Is obviously looking at the numbers as well, which is not as bad. When I brought up the proposal for this video, the numbers were actually a hell of a lot lower than they are now. It's been updated since, so now it's actually kind of on par with Mirror. But physical sales are still the lowest out of all their albums. But compare that to again, like 4 years ago to Kiss from the Darkness. They're nowhere near those numbers. Now, obviously, Kiss of Darkness is nowhere near like Temptation Box or whatever either, because different time period then, and physical sales were much more prominent. Obviously, digital has dominated anything, so you can't really take too much away from those figures, too much.
Well,
But it's still
I think
interesting to see.
I think the greatest proof of that is a rather interesting fact. If you read the physical sales figures forwards from standard, it reads as a drop of 10,000 each time. So 58,000 for standard, 49 for Hello World, 39 for Yellow, 27 for Honey, 19 for Kiss for the Darkness, 9 for Mirror. Frankly, the fact that Luminous managed to sell a single record, therefore, is a mathematical wonder. Because it should be going into minus figures at this point. But I think that's two correlating lines. One is just the fact that diminishing returns, you can't help it. However good you are, you're always going to have a difference between when you first broke out and what happens if you keep on going. And the other element is, like you say, and I think very prominently, even in Japan, the drop in physical album sales is very much a thing. So yeah, for me, like Luminous is kind of a victim to that, as is this entire trend. But the interesting thing for me, and I'm going to throw this in as the positive, is that obviously Luminous came out on March the 20th, which is just over a month ago, and it's already registered nearly as many physical sales as Mirror, which means if we come back to this in a month or two, it will probably be the first album since Standard to buck the trend and reverse the trend and have a higher number of sales than its predecessor. So I actually think that maybe what we're about to see is actually probably a very positive turn in the opposite direction. I don't think that this album is going to have the same legs as Kiss from the Darkness. I'd be very interested to see if it gets up to the same. And actually, John, maybe get in the comments to us what you think. Do you think it will surpass Kiss from the Darkness? I think it's going to end up somewhere in the low, maybe like sort of 12, 13,000 when all said and done, somewhere between. But I think it will buck the trend a little bit from Mirror and go higher.
Yeah. I mean, the only one statistic we don't have right now is the official. I believe there's a difference between the Japanese, I think it's Oricon, and the Japanese Billboard.
Yes.
Two separate different things. But if anybody can let us know in the comments, I'd be very interested to know. But they're not even.
Harry!
They don't even have a mention in the Japanese Billboard at all for Luminous, which I would be very, very shocked
Fuck the Billboard.
yeah, if that didn't even make it on there. So if anybody actually knows if that did or didn't make it onto the Japanese Billboard, be very interesting to know.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to know how any of that landed. But the truth is that I think what we're actually coming to here, though, is we're coming to that interesting point and that interesting conclusion. I've said before as well that for me, one of the biggest factors is not even the band. I just think that the general, and again, I know this is a contentious point, but I think the commercial side of everything around Scandal. You look at other bands, they don't always get it right, but some of them they're really strong at promoting. Bands like Bandmade, Hanabiya as well, Nemophila.
Yeah.
These groups are very strong at promoting. Whereas Scandal, it seems like every single commercial decision seems to be designed to make people go away. And I've spoken to like Japanese bands here. I talk to Japanese bands, and we talk about influences, and I ask them about Scandal, and usually the reaction is, "Oh, are they still together?" I've had that several times.
Yeah.
And the truth is that I think they've been slightly shot by the commercial side. But I think we are now getting to that point where they're so legendary that at least they will always live off of the fact they've got goodwill with people
Yeah.
and they are producing good music, even if it's not getting heard.
I mean, I want to touch on another video that we did about Love Bites, where me and you were talking about how with like Miyako songwriting, how it needs to evolve a little bit, and I feel like
Okay.
Scandal, in my own personal opinion, have stopped evolving. They've kind of been the same now for a while. There's differences, but there's minuscule differences. They've plateaued. I think. The fact that you can't argue with me here.
Okay, so I have a slightly mixed feeling on this because Scandal is one of those groups who I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because how much, how much do you expect from someone after so many albums, so much
Yeah.
time? I think for me though, Scandal do every album comes out is different. Like this album genuinely for me feels different from the other ones. Now, of course, one of the reasons why had so much longevity as well is rather than every album coming out sounding like a totally different band, they have certain writing styles and certain things that they do keep at their core every single album, and therefore permeates most of their songs. So you could argue that Scandal, it depends how much difference do you need? And of course, this is rather interesting coming from myself, who's always pushing for I want difference, variation all the time. Yeah, I would say that I can understand if anyone, even if you'd gone back like 3 albums ago and said the exact same thing, if you'd said to me like you listening to Yellow and you said, well, look, and now they're now at the point where they've been doing too many of these rock and roll songs. There's always a line you can draw where you say, well, this is too similar to me. And so I do kind of see your point, but I think for me, they are staying true to who they are. You know what you're going to get roughly, musically speaking, but they are throwing in enough variation that every album feels like something that they wanted to make because they had an idea rather than something they had to make because people want more new material. And so long as it sounds like something that actually wanted to be made rather than was made for the sake of it, then I would say there's probably some creative oomph behind it. So yeah, I do actually see your point. Ultimately, I disagree, but I do see your point. I wouldn't argue it too vehemently because there is
I
a
feel like
subjectivity
me and you two are gonna have two very contrasting reviews to this album. I feel like if you want to go and see the more positive review, go to Howard's channel. If you want to see probably the more, I would say, constructive criticism of the two, probably go
I
and
think
check out mine.
we both definitely have our own gripes, but then again, I have a gripe with everything. I can love something, I can think it's the best thing in the world. I'll find a gripe in it because that's for me that's the sign that the sign that you love something is that you're able to recognize what's not perfect about it
Yeah.
because nothing is 100% perfect.
Nothing is 100% perfect ever. There
This was
is
cool. This
There
was
is no
cool.
yeah, I would like to know if you guys are watching this and you've watched this far. Me and Howard obviously waffling on about our opinions and our takes. If you are a Scandal fan or you're not a Scandal fan, if you've listened to Luminous, like let us know what your thoughts on this album, what your thoughts on Scandal as a whole now. Like Howard said, there's been plenty of people like, wait, they're still going.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Outside of the people who know, there's a
yeah.
lot of people who like have heard of but aren't sure.
Yeah. The reason why we're having this conversation is not obviously to bad mouth Scandal because we're both Scandal fans. We
Oh
both
God, no,
are
no.
Scandal
Yeah.
fans. It's obviously when you see the numbers and you see the statistics and it paints a different picture to how we appreciate them, then I feel like it's a conversation and a debate worth having because I feel like every band will hit this point in their careers at some point.
Especially as they are so legendary. I
Yes.
mean, we did that video the other day where we were talking about bands who we think are underrated. And this is one of the reasons why I put forward Scandal, is because, in my opinion, and I actually, to be honest, I think the conclusion I would come to from this video is that what we're looking at is a convergence of so many things. I think it's poor publicity, a focus on writing albums that are albums rather than writing singles that are going to, a lot of their earlier albums had very clear singles, but I don't feel that's where they're writing anymore. Obviously, the fact that with time, the law of diminishing returns just applies to virtually everything. Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different reasons why it is. So no one is correct, but it's interesting to mull over them, which is what I think we've been doing here today, and consider what that means for a brand who are this legendary, but this underseen, underappreciated. Everyone knows the name, and yet no one, well, not enough people are, paying attention. So
Yeah, for a band that's been so consistent, I think, and so loved within their own community, it always
mm
felt like a band that would, that they would do well, even if they did the worst album in the world. It felt like they couldn't go past a certain point. And just to see, obviously, like I said, the statistics and the figures don't lie, but just to see them drop off what could be quite a lot. Although, like I said, in 2 months' time, when we come back to this, numbers could be completely freaking different. So
even by the time this goes out. So, when this
yeah,
video goes out, because it's going to be a few days, might even be a week after we recorded this. I want you to go check it out yourself. Drop the numbers in the comments. Tell us off. Tell us off when
tell
you
us
know
off.
the real
Yeah,
comments.
because the numbers are quite close. Like I said, when I came up with this idea to talk about this one a couple of days
Yeah.
ago, the numbers were nowhere near mirror. Like they were like 4,000 odd. So that's been updated since we last spoke about it, and I'm actually kind of glad actually. So we'll probably surpass mirror. I would put my bet that it probably will at some point.
Seems that way. It's only a few hundred behind at the moment. So, I
Yeah,
mean, one of us could go out there and tip it.
tip it. Yeah. This is when we record next week, and I'm like, Howard, what's that stack of CDs you've got in the back?
So I didn't know that theft didn't count towards sales.
Yeah, that would be the first question. Is not what they're doing there, it's how you afforded them.
So Howard, why can I hear sirens? What the
Like I said, it's an interesting debate that I think is worth mentioning a little bit, because we come on here a lot for a lot of bands, Bandmade, Baby Metal, and stuff like that, and we praise them to high heaven and stuff like that, and having a different scenario, I think, in the term of Scandal, because everybody wants Scandal to do well. I want Scandal to do well. You want Scandal to do well. I feel like obviously the fans are the one that want them to do well. It just, I don't want to say it feels like like the end, but it feels like a drop.
But shouldn't we as fans accept that this is the inevitable thing that we should expect to happen? I mean, obviously there are other factors like the diminishing sales of physical media.
Yeah.
But should we not just expect, well, look, this is a legendary. I mean, for example, do you remember when we were doing the Spotify thing the other day? We looked at X Japan, and X Japan were like pretty low on the stats compared to a lot of our groups.
Yeah.
It's just the truth. After time, you're not the hot new thing. Doesn't mean that you don't have the respect. It just means you're not catching those kind of big waves of views that are coming off of like the latest TikTok video or like
Yeah, I feel like that plays a massive
like
part
that.
as well. Yeah, we were just praising Anno in another video, and Ado as well, like all these hot new artists that are coming up, taking literal billions of viewers on YouTube and Spotify and stuff like that, are kind of stealing the limelight a little bit at the minute.
Yeah. But
So,
that's what they always do, and you always get the pop people stealing that limelight. But well, look, we all know that Scandal are going to be around forever. But I'm just really
forever,
interested to know
ever,
if you
forever, ever. Sorry.
It's got to leave early. But, I'd love to know like what you guys think at home. Yeah, it's a really interesting subject, and also not just Scandal as well though. Comparative bands. Can you think of other bands where they continue to please the fan base and just kind of like just like allowed themselves to just slip into their own little world and just do their own thing and just because that's what I feel like Scandal's doing. I think Scandal are just kind of like being Scandal, and they're like let the views be what they may, let the listens be what they may, and just rolling on like that. But yeah, any comparative examples you can give in the comments would be really interesting.
Yeah,
Love to know what you think
that'd
about
be
this.
really interesting. I think X Japan's probably a good one. I would probably say a British band. Howard will know these guys. Probably hasn't heard them in about 10 years, 15 years. The Darkness as well. They're still going.
They're still going.
They're still going. Yeah, yeah. Exactly. But everybody remembers them from 20 odd years ago. So I feel Yeah.
Uh,
Still loved as well. Still loved. They keep every time they release a song, they're like, "Oh, these guys are still going," and then you
wait a
forget
minute,
about
they
them.
have
Like,
more than one song?
yeah, that's what I mean. You kind of forget about them a week later, but then
I'm
like
gonna get
2 years
more
later,
hate for my comments about the darkness than I am about anything else.
So yeah, exactly. If you believe in a thing called love, then make sure to like and sub on this video. See what I did there. Make sure to like and subscribe to this video as well. We really, really appreciate it. And this is a slightly different debate than what we usually do. Slightly different video, looking a little bit more in depth at some of the numbers and stuff. So if this is something that you guys particularly like and you'd like to see us do more with other bands as well, then now's the time to show that you like these type of videos. So yeah, do you wanna
All
lead us
right.
out, or do you want me to do it for once?
Yeah, so I'll just say, yeah, take care. Follow, go listen to Luminous if you haven't already, and if you have, listen to it again. And follow Neon as he tells us to keep
Keep our ears to the east. Hells yeah. Get out of here.
ah